welcome to SFI Not So Live with me, Jay Evans, your host. A big welcome to you all. This is a special SFI Not So Live this month, and it is solely about green mortgages and green financing. So it's a big discussion. It's something we do cover quite a lot, and we know that, so please don't sigh. But we put together a really brilliant panel to talk to you today. So without further ado, let's meet them first. So Tony, over to you first.
Yeah, hi everybody. My name's Tony Hall. I'm Head of Business Development here at Saffron for Intermediaries. My role is basically, as it says, I'm here to make sure that intermediaries get everything they need and want from us as a lender.
Thank you, Tony. And now on to our second guest, someone who's been on the podcast before. Welcome to Mr. Nick Mendez. Nick, good morning.
Yeah, hi everyone. So my name's Nicholas Mendez, mortgage technical manager here at John Charcoal, and my role within the broker is to give press comments and commentary on the market.
Thank you, Nick. Good to have you back with us again. And our final panellist, and we are so delighted to welcome somebody you probably all know from the green finance arena. So welcome to Rachel Hunniset from, actually, I'm not going to say where you're from. Rachel, I'll let you do your introduction. Good morning.
Hello, thank you everyone. It's lovely to be here. I'll give a quick intro on the Green Finance Institute for anyone who's not familiar. We were set up in 2019 as a direct response to key policy recommendations made by the industry-led Green Finance Task Force to UK government at the early end of 2018. We're completely independent, but we're kind of with a commercial focus, backed by government and led by people who've got experience of working in the financial sector to really drive good outcomes for the financial sector. My role is to lead the Green Mortgage campaign within our Built Environment programme. So this very much is the podcast for me.
Couldn't agree more, Rachel. Thank you for joining us. It's absolutely brilliant to have you with us. So, without further ado, let's crack on. Just some caveats first. We are going to be discussing green finance, but we're doing it from our own perspective. So some of these will be our own opinions as opposed to that of our employers. And just a reminder, this is recorded, not filmed, in June 2023. So some of the information we give may be slightly out of date. So without further ado, there's a really simple first question for anyone on the panel, really, but I'm going to come to you first, Rachel. What is a green mortgage?
Do you know what? It's probably more probable that most of the audience would still have some confusion around this question, because actually there is no technical definition for what a green mortgage is or isn't as we stand in the market at the moment. And you can look at that two ways, but actually, firstly, I think while we're in this nascent period of these kind of really early beginnings of what the green mortgage market looks like, 'cause it still is a relatively small portion of overall lending that's done in the UK year on year, it's important that we as an industry are able to test and experiment and learn with what works and what doesn't work. And at the moment, the regulator's giving us space to do that, which is really exciting for the industry. Generally, people will be familiar with, there's broadly 5 categories of green mortgage, but generally people will be familiar with green mortgages that incentivise through pricing. So whether that be a discount on the rate or a bit of cash back, those are probably the products that spring to mind. We do also see other products on the market that enhance affordability for buying an A or B rated property, further advanced products, etc., etc. The list goes on.
Thanks, Rachel. So we're seeing some growth in products, and I think we all know what green mortgage is, but thanks for the clarification. So Nick, the obvious question to come to you with is, are green mortgages having a cut through with the buyers? I mean, is there interest in these products? I mean, is it just sorry to say this, but a bit of a dead duck at the moment? It's not a high priority. Maybe I'm wrong?
Jay, you're going to put me in hot water here. The answer to is, look, especially in the last few years, we've seen products coming on with the green mortgage. If it's an EPCC or above, typically there's going to be more focus around landlords than it is to be around homeowners with potential legislation changes. And not only that, we're seeing, as Rachel mentioned, around the products either a cashback or a small discount on the standard rates. But more recently, we're seeing innovation around, nationwide, as an example, given 0% loans, and we're probably going to see other lenders follow suit with similar sort of products. So this conversation around green mortgages isn't going to disappear. If anything, it's going to become more complex. Conversations are going to become more in depth. Not only that, clients are becoming more aware in terms of where their money goes. We're seeing it with pensions, savings, investments, and with mortgages now. People are really conscious about where they put their money into and what impact it has on the world. So, in answer to the question, there's more that brokers need to do. in a nutshell, in terms of more conversations to educate clients, but also when we have more holistic conversations around, let's say, when we're doing home improvements, are we taking that conversation further around retrofitting, about materials and things on those lines? So, mortgage brokers aren't builders. That's really clear, and there is guidance out there, but there's more as brokers what we should be doing.
Tony, I'm sure you've got an opinion on this. What do you think? Cut through there. You've got a retrofit mortgage on the market, green one. How popular is it?
Yeah, we have. Yeah, definitely. Look, the biggest thing that will drive this market is demand. Yeah, and it's still not there because everybody doesn't quite know what it is. The fact that we're having to define it means that it's not that clear yet. So I think once you've got definition, then it will start to pay off, and you'll start to see far more innovation from lenders. But lenders need to kind of create this market, in my view. All right, we have to create the products that creates the demand within the broker that the consumer sees. So I think that's a key one for me. But no, it's all about education, and I think if I was looking at the advised process and I was fact finding my client, how often do we even ask the question at the moment? Are you interested in a green mortgage? Are you interested in improving the energy efficiency of your house or your carbon zero approach? Because that then drives the conversation down the various routes. And I don't know. Nick probably can tell me more than that from a broker perspective, whether those questions are asked. Because if that's not asked, you're never going to answer as a consumer.
Nick, over to you on that one.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that probably the question that probably isn't, and I think brokers are very much a stickler of habit, or creatures of habit. Sorry. So when we have those conversations, I think I was talking to Halifax, and they were saying they did a research on a new build area, and although those properties were C or above, the brokers that recommended certain products actually gave Halifax non-green products because, and the research behind it was brokers aren't confident in terms of understanding what an EPC is, where to search for it. What they don't want to do is look bad when they're talking to the client recommending a product and it comes to offer and then they have to resource it because they've done it incorrectly. So there's a huge part around education, not just for the clients, definitely brokers as well.
Yeah, and even sorry, Rachel, I'll just one second, then you'll have a far more interesting bit of what I'm about to say. But I'm sure. But it's not just the broker or the lender; it's the sourcing system. Can you filter by green product? I don't know. Maybe you can actually. I don't actually know. It's a question for them. But that's where it all starts. You've got to create the functionality to enable the right conversation to be had. Rachel, sorry.
On both those points, no, that's wonderful. On both those points, on sourcing systems, there are filters at the moment, but the challenge is what defines green and what does that look like? And there's kind of two elements to this. So the Green Finance Institute, we developed Green Home Finance Principles, which 11 lenders now adhere to, which gives a bit of a principle. It's a voluntary code of what a green mortgage product can look like and how to add some authenticity and prevent risk concerns around greenwashing. We're really seeing lenders looking for more verification to try and support them through that product design process. But second to that, and probably this is my old world hat, I started out my career in finance as a broker and then went and worked for lenders. This is my kind of both in intermediary sector. So my hat kind of comes back to just picking up on something you both mentioned around brokers having conversations around materials and where does the responsibility lie for this with, do lenders have to create this market? Do brokers create this market? Does this come from government policy? Where does that sit? We're interestingly in a market where we're asking lenders to innovate for a need that doesn't quite exist. And that's completely reversed to the way that products are usually built. So this isn't just a lender at a senior level wanting to make a product. It's actually almost re-engineering the product design process, which we absolutely cannot underestimate how challenging that is for lenders. I think it's really important to almost defend is probably too much a strong word, but defend lenders in their position in that. We're asking a huge amount of lenders in this market to support brokers. Earlier this year, along with lots of people, and if I start to list people, I will forget someone and forever feel guilty. But along with lots of other bodies across our industry, we put together the Brokers Handbook, which looks to address these challenges, which looks to give an overview of kind of it's a really light touch information. And the reason it's a light touch information, but it's very detailed. If you want to go and look at something about solar panels. There's one page on solar panels that gives you enough of information to have a conversation. Because the thing that we always say in the intermediary sector is brokers need to have enough information to have a good quality conversation. We must be really delicate here that we don't start asking brokers to recommend particular retrofit technologies, because that puts us into a different position in a regulatory board. So I would say to brokers to have the confidence to go and expand your own knowledge on it. You don't have to be recommending what type of retrofit people go for, and it's really important that we make that distinction when we start asking brokers to get educated in this space, because what we don't want to do is put brokers in further danger of making recommendations that they're not qualified to give. So it's a really, really important definition for me.
Particularly with consumer duty and unintended consequences. So I think that just summarises that hugely.
Absolutely.
Yeah, interesting points there, actually, to be fair. So, Nick, we were talking about innovations, talking about incentives, talking about these bolt-ons. There must be some really interesting things out there in the market. There must be lots of things going on. What does it feel like from a broker perspective?
Yeah, definitely. I think there are so many things which when it comes to that, there was a point which was raised earlier around lenders, and I just wanted to touch on that as well, around what products can be done. And when we're talking about innovation, well, I think we've got to start back at the basics. And when we consider most homeowners and landlords, especially in the current climate, are opting to do a product transfer over a remortgage because of the affordability and rates and things on those lines. When we consider that EPC lasts for 10 years, I don't understand why no lender's done this product as yet, considering if you buy a property, your EPC lasts for 10 years, and in that time you're probably going to do multiple product transfers. But when you do work to the property, you do it over a period of time, you don't do it straight away. So when it comes to a product transfer, we should be encouraging clients when they've done work to get a revised EPC, but also with lenders' systems, should be able to pick up if an EPC's changed over a period of time. So that means when it comes to a product transfer, it's a very quick process. Just go, just want to stay with us. You've improved your EPC. Let's give it to you a better green product. But likewise, when it comes to remortgaging, we should incentivize not just cashback, but actually paying for an EPC. It's not a costly product. It's £50 to £100, but then you're giving something back to the client, whereby not only do they know that their EPC is improved, but better value in property and better rates and so on and so on. So there's more that needs to be done. That was me just rambling on in terms of some of the other things that are available. Jay, apologies, I'm ranted from the question itself.
Don't worry, Nick, it's totally fine. That was really interesting points you raised there. So, Tony, just coming to you on your retrofit, because it's a long-standing product. It's a green product, but it really tackles one of the biggest issues we've got in this country, and that is the poor housing stock. It literally looks at improving the shocking stock that we've got. So in the long term, it's better for the user, the person that lives in the house, because they'll have a better economical house to run. So just tell me a little bit about your product and tell me how effective that's been.
Yeah, that product's been out for longer than I've been at Saffron, so that's more than 3 years. But again, it's very hard promoting into a vacuum when there's no one listening to you at the time, and that was kind of the case because there was no demand for it. But no, that product was and is, and we are developing our whole proposition now as the start point, is recognizing the 65% of properties in the UK that aren't C or better. And actually rewarding somebody to get to an E, not to get to a C, but to get to an E rating, and then getting a reduction of 0.1% on your interest rate. So we're not loading that mortgage, because that mortgage is at our standard rates along with our other owner occupied products, and then we're giving you that discount for a simple thing of going from an F to an E. Which actually is quite a simple thing to do. It's not that costly. And that's been around forever. It's been around since green mortgages were really started to be talked about. So it's there, but until recently we'd had very little take up, because again, there's not the demand for it yet. That's the challenge.
So when the GFI launched, Rachel, we had probably, 5-6 products on the market. How many have we got now? Is there some innovation? Is there new products? What are we looking at? What does the green mortgage market look like for the brokers that are listening and perhaps haven't delved a little bit deeper into it?
Well, hot off the press, I'm probably going to get in trouble for saying this, but I did an audit of this week, and we're now up to 60 products. As a building society launched a new product last week, now up to 60 products on the market, which is wonderful news, really encouraging. I was listening along to Tony speak there about early demand and products being on the market for a while and limited uptake. And I'm listening and thinking, if I was a broker, I'd be thinking, why do you want me to engage with this now? What is the interest in me? What's in it for me right now? And it kind of led me to thinking about, well, firstly, my role at the GFI is to create a green mortgage market which is scalable and plays a significant role in decarbonising housing stock. And the reason we say significant is we have only got 27 years. So the government has set a legally binding target to get to net zero by 2050. That's 27 years away. If you think of the average first-time buyer now, they're generally taking products that were 25 to 30 years plus term. I'll let Nick will be closer to the data on that regard than I am. And so if you're kind of broker that sees people that are doing terms that are longer than 27 years, the mortgages that you're advising on today are going to need to be fit for the future when it comes to net zero in 2050. And I mean, I'm definitely no expert on this, but Tony's touched briefly on consumer duty and looking after your customers for the long term. And even back when I left broking, which feels like 100 years ago, we were talking a lot about how when we moved from 2-year fixed rate products to 5-year fixed rate products, how do we try and add value? How does a broker maintain that relationship over this time? So for me, I see in the market as we have right now in the market at the moment, it's an opportunity to have a good conversation with your customer and really add value to that conversation and talk to them about their future plans and talk to them about sustainability, while energy prices are forefront of mind for everybody. So I just wanted to pick up on that point Tony said around demand. I think it's important that we highlight to brokers and highlight to the audience that this isn't some distant thing that's years and years and years away. This is right here in the market now, and there's a real opportunity for brokers to make a huge difference here.
And in the cost of living crisis, surely it's in our best interest to make our house more economical, should I say, because we want to save money. We want to save money on energy bills. So, there is I suppose there's a need analysis here, so the purchaser, how dedicated and the brokers know. But surely, we're at a crux of a climate crisis, according to the news and according to scientists. Surely we should be paying much more.
I was just going to say, look, with all of this, the human psyche only ever does anything when it's at the brink, right? And that's you can see that over history, but it's always about what's in it for me. Until that what's in it for me is crystallized, nothing will happen. So if you go and ask most people, when's the government target for net zero? One, who would know, right? The general consumer, let alone consumers, lenders, brokers, everybody, right? And then secondly, what is net zero? Define it. How many consumers can actually say? So how can we expect people to go and do something different if they don't even understand what it is they're supposed to be doing? It's all about clarity, and I think that's probably what's missing. And we as people in the know need to educate through whatever medium, so that everybody's really clear on what this means and what this means to you, and then people have a choice to make. And I don't think we've clarified across our country, not alone mortgages, but everything, what this is. That's just my, again, personal view.
Just to build upon that a little bit, I completely agree, and I really like the sentiment of we all want to do good things, and we all want to leave the world a better place for our grandchildren, and a lot of us will be on board on that, but not everyone. Not everyone is a philanthropist. Not everyone. Some people do not have those values. I was going to say something else and then realised I was being recorded. And so even if you do just want to watch the world burn, there you go, I'll say it. Even if you really are that person, really, really cold light of day, there is a significant commercial opportunity here. UK housing accounts for 20%, around 20%, the figures are kind of conflicting depending on which research you look at. Around 20% of all of our carbon emissions come from UK housing. That's more than the cars on our road, right? And we look at how much investment has gone into decarbonising road transport. And so much, almost half of that housing stock will be mortgaged. If it's residential housing stock, will be mortgaged. And with £250 billion estimated that needs to be spent to get that housing stock net zero ready. So that's £250 billion needs to be spent in the next 27 years. How much of that can be raised through additional finance on mortgages. And if every broker looked at their mortgage book and thought, actually, how much can I then support my customers through financing that? All of a sudden, this becomes not just something we want to do because it's good and it helps the country and it protects our world for the future. This also becomes a massive commercial opportunity. And I think we need to talk a bit more about that, because we do work in the finance world and we can't just rely on the goodwill of people to build a market which will scale. We need to also highlight there is a commercial opportunity in there for people while also doing good. And isn't that the best kind of commercial opportunity, where it's doing good as well?
I don't think any of us could disagree with that. Nick, over to you.
No, it's all really valid points, and I think one of the key things when it comes to it is around legislation and what the government do, which is going to have a huge impact. So whether we see the proposed changes on landlords, and whether I think I mentioned about there's a bill that's currently making its way through Parliament called the Minimum Energy Performance of Buildings number 2 bill. So what impact that has on homeowners in the future as well, in the run up to 2050, these are all points which we need to be aware of. And I think Rachel hit the nail on the head in relation to making sure mortgages are fit for the future in terms of those terms, and it's going to come around quickly, and it really sort of brings it home, especially as a broker myself. You sort of going, am I doing enough? Am I having that conversation in depth as I should? And especially those that are doing product transfers, you just think the amount of conversations which are being missed at the moment.
Thanks, Nick. Tony Santaliva. So, Tony, thank you for joining us for the first half of the podcast. It's really good to have you with us. So let's carry on. So Rachel and Nick and I are staying with you. So, Nick, there's a lot of focus here on EPC ratings. So we've had a conversation about this before. Many of us have had conversations, but it's all about EPC ratings. Do consumers really understand that? Is that the right measurement? Do we not need to make this a bit more tangible? Do you think the EPC ratings are really as effective as we think they might be?
Yeah, and that's one of the things which I've always sort of mentioned when we talk about we have to sort of move away from EPC conversations sometimes and actually focus on where it actually makes an improvement, whether it's to do with utility bills or the property value. There are other ways in which an EPC can improve that for a homeowner outside of what the band is. But the other part which I was going to mention was around what they use in Europe, which seems to be a lot more suitable. So they use the environmental impact rating, which I believe estimates CO2 emissions, which is the EIR, which is already on the EPC. So essentially, no additional information is actually needed. But it's just a system which we've decided to use following the Hicks, I guess, going down it.
Rachel, come to you. EPC ratings. Come on then, give us a wham. Because do consumers really know? I mean, I think I see the stickers on the side of a fridge or on the side of a washing machine. Think, need that one. Don't have the same resonance from a house. I don't think. Do you think consumers generally don't? Do you think they are kind of disconnected from the EPC rating because it doesn't have any tangible benefit to them at the moment?
Yeah, I do agree, and I think that maybe it's a broad brush way of saying it, but I think you probably are more likely to know the EPC performance of your fridge than you are your house, especially if you've lived there for a long time. And generally, this was something that came up as part of you selling your house, part of the things you need to sell your house, and it gets stuffed in a drawer and you don't think about it. And it's probably only come to light or forefront of mind more recently with the energy crisis that we saw towards the latter part of last year, and all of a sudden. And maybe it's just the group of people I hang around with, but you do find yourself at the pub chatting about your EPC certificate, or perhaps maybe not your EPC certificate, maybe you're talking about your bills, but it's a different type of guise, isn't it? We're all talking about energy performance a lot more.
It's almost like a sales point now, because I had someone come around to look at shutters for my house, and then they started going on about the energy efficiency and I was like, oh really? And I was just like, tell me more. But it was very much, it's almost as, I think there was something out this morning in one of the papers around conmen in when it comes to installation and, dodgy traders now that have seen this gap, as you mentioned, that 250 billion, they're going, great, let's jump on this. So that's the other part, is who do you trust when it comes to this, and who do you go to? And it's not like previous trades. Yeah.
And you know what, actually, the living quality thing that Nick mentioned just there, I don't mind sharing with the audience. Earlier this year, I moved from an EPC F to an EPC B. It's almost an A. It's 4 points off an A. It's very sad, but it's almost an A. And the quality of life and the not living in drafts and not having to put draft excluder around, and that it is a much more comfortable way to live. So even on a small sample size of one, I'm proud to vouch that it does make a difference to the way you live, and that you do find yourself using a lot less heating and just a bit more comfortable, really.
So, Nick, do people really know what goes into an EPC rating? Does it even look at, the efficiency of the home per se, or is it looking at the quality of the product around, the insulation you have, the windows you have, whether you're using external ways of keeping in things? Do consumers really get it? I mean, is it understandable, and is it feasible? And again, are we testing regularly enough in our homes that we're keeping up to scratch with it?
I would say no in both accounts. So EPCs, you might notice it from like a sticker on a washing machine, but people don't realise it also has an impact when it comes to your home. And it really comes up when you either come to sell or purchase a property, and it's got typically EPCs are valid for 10 years. Now, in terms of what an EPC actually entails, it's actually based on the costs of energy rather than the carbon impact. So actually, you could go on a government website, you put your postcode in, it will show what the current EPC is, but the work that you could do to improve it, whether it's changing light bulbs, insulation, doors, windows, etc. And all these things, it's a points-based system where it can have an impact in terms of improving it. So by doing it, you might be open to slightly better rates and discounts and things on those lines. That's not to say there are some issues with EPCs, but it's the tool that we've got today.
It's a fair. We've got to use it. We're stuck with it. But to be fair, in all the times that I've done these podcasts, I've done webinars on this subject, I've learned something really, really simple. It's not actually that hard to improve it, is it? The actual mechanisms of putting it together, the tangible assets you need to put in your home in order to make an improvement really isn't that significant, is it, Nick?
Yeah, definitely. As we mentioned, whether it's, as you mentioned, changing the light bulb, draft excluders, bleeding the radiators, all these little things do have an impact. And, when we talk about EPC, there's, I guess there's that issue that people always think about. There's a huge cost to it, whereas actually, there's small changes that you can do which can make a significant impact. But the other part is around EPC is actually the wider benefit that you could have in terms of utility costs, as Rachel mentioned, but also the property value when it comes to a slightly higher EPC. So yeah, there are so many little things that you can do. And again, the bigger picture is all these things are going to have a positive impact on the environment and the world that we live in, which is how we've got to look at it.
And we've all got to do our bit, haven't we? And we need something. We need something tangible. We're human beings. We need to be able to see a difference. We need to be able to view it. So I suppose the EPC certificates, as much as we might not all love them, Rachel, they're essential and they're a necessity.
I should add, this is definitely, I'm going to call out my own opinion here as opposed to a broader opinion. I think there's real merit here in keeping it simple. Homeowners need to have some sort of survey or something that shows them what the right thing for their home is. Something as simple as saying everyone needs a heat pump. Heat pumps are great, absolutely, in the market for a house at the moment, and I'm looking at one with a heat pump because that was more exciting for me than a utility room. So that's probably everything to do with the fact of what I do for a living. But I do think we have to be cautious of saying one particular thing is the elixir of life when it comes to serving the industry we work in. And I'm a big fan of fabric first approaches. I'm a big fan of looking at what can be done at a low cost before you look at, because if you get a heat pump in but you have no insulation in your property, it's actually going to be more costly and use more energy. So I think we need to be careful about, and I say that as not a heat pump expert. I do think there's a danger here, and this is probably going to be the most cantankerous thing I say on the podcast. I think there's a danger here in our industry that we're getting a bit too lost in the weeds. And by that, I mean that we are a finance industry. We serve people and help them buy homes mostly. But if you're capital raising for other home improvements, as a mortgage advisor, as the communities that we serve, we don't sit down and say, oh, you're going for a Wren kitchen or a B&Q kitchen, and what kind of handles are you going for? I think we need to, and it's an example I use a lot, so if you've heard me speak on stage about that, apologies to be boring and repeat it. But, we're really at risk here of mortgage advisors having to get drawn into a conversation about the colour of piping in their heat pump or what kind of insulation they're going for, etc. Your customer's looking to raise finance to retrofit their home. Our job is to provide them with finance that they can access frictionally, that they understand, and they get good advice on that finance. We also have a duty of care to put forward to them what they could be looking at, and also, hope that they're going to find reputable providers, and that kind of guidance and steer is coming. We're seeing lots of work going on around government and more broadly on how we kind of put together hubs of and a certification in type of retrofitting technologies. But I'm really nervous of us getting really distracted by particular technologies, because I think that does two things. It makes it seem really overcomplicated to brokers, and at which point they go, oh, hang on a minute, I'm a bit nervous of this. But also it puts us at risk, as I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, and you only have to look at spray foam as an example of that. Had you have had one broker that was a real fan of that, recommending that to their customers, they come to remortgage and can't remortgage. Spoiler alert for anyone who's not au fait with the spray foam disaster, it didn't work out well for many people. So I just am nervous of us getting too excited about particular technology, underscored with I am a big fan of a heat pump and I would like one. But I just think when it comes to mortgages and the purpose of the podcast and the purpose of what we're trying to get across to brokers, to get too excited by one particular technology just leaves us a bit blind to what else could be done. And it could be something as simple as bleeding your radiators or putting on thicker curtains. They could be simpler first steps people could take that don't involve a significant outlay.
That's a very fair point. Do you not think, and I'll put this to both of you, but Nick, I'll come to you first, do you not think there's an opportunity here for the entire property chain to kind of come together, work together and resolve some of this issue? There's some innovative products out there where you can get a cash advance to get the work done. But isn't it about the partnerships to go with it? As Rachel was just saying, Nick, we have got the potential, for people to be duped, to get the wrong things, to focus on the wrong things. We need these professionals together. Is it not time for stronger collaboration across our industry?
Yeah, I'm gonna plug on that point. So JC, so John Charcoal, we've partnered with Hinckley and Rugby and Cero on that very subject. We saw there was a huge barrier for consumers and brokers. So in essence, you've got Hinckley and Rugby, a building society. They'll be able to provide the funding for homeowners in advance of the work, which is one of the key barriers when it comes to it. And the other part is with Cero's, they'll be able to give a report to the homeowner, which will detail, essentially do a report on the home, point out areas where they can improve it, typical cost and savings, as well as mention installers as well. So from a broker's point of view, we're able to advise the client in terms of finance, but also take away that element of trying to know it all and leave it to a professional. So essentially you've got all three parties working in collaboration, supporting the client, which is the main thing. That there needs to be more of that within the industry, but that only comes from desire from the lenders and the brokers itself and the brokerages to really try and take on more and want to do more.
There has been a shift, certainly since pandemic. I think I've noticed it a lot more, but there's been a social shift, but also an environmental shift. People are changing and habits are changing. They're being more conscious about who they spend with. So you would have thought this would be resonating more now. You would have thought that a green product would be the thing they asked a broker for. I know it sounds probably a bit too optimistic, but surely that's the thing. I mean, we need to shift that excitement that's around other things like electric cars into the housing market. Rachel, do you agree?
Do you know what? I think you just touched upon there the kind of consumer behaviour shift we're seeing, and you're actually seeing in every probably bar two or three, maybe take petrol etc. out of this, but in most industries we're seeing a real shift towards where people are spending their money. Are they choosing to spend their money on sustainable things? We've seen this in investments and other areas that probably report this more widely than ours, that people are asking, what are the ethics of the company I'm investing in? What are the ethics of the company I'm buying from? And we've seen that represented across the high street. We've seen that with fast fashion, with the pushback to more sustainable buying, with the pushback to buying secondhand. And I mean, I could go on and on. That goes across industries. And I think the finance sector is really just keeping in line with that. This isn't anything radical or different that's just for us. This is looking at the whole industry or the way people spend their money, the way people live, thinking actually perhaps I'd rather spend a little bit more and know that my energy provider is getting that from clean energy as opposed to something that isn't clean. And I think the green mortgage sector is just kind of keeping in line with that.
We all have an incentive, if you want to call it that, for looking at this 2050 net zero goal. And, we've all got to contribute to get there. And the housing market is one of the biggest contributors of wasted energy. I mean, we've talked about the stocks and how bad they are. We need to go for this, don't we? We need to be focused. We need consumers to be focused with us, don't we, Nick?
Without a doubt, I think there's a huge incentive for lenders, for brokerages, for everyone towards this 2050 goal. We've all got to take a look and take stock of what our current emissions are and what we can to improve it. Speaking from in terms of John Charcoal's perspective, it's a minefield. When we've looked at how we could reduce ours, there are so many different reports out there and consultants and things on those lines. There's a huge cost barrier as well when you think about who do you go to and how do you actually make the changes. So if I think a bit from our scale as a broker, considering most advisors work independently or work at home within the network, whereas a lender, where they've got essentially these massive offices across the country. So there's so much I can imagine that lenders are thinking about what they can and do to get to net zero. And you want to essentially go essentially beyond just some of the easy steps. So for example, where it's just like planting a tree based on every mortgage that you do or things on those lines, you've got to look at it and go, right, what can we do to actually make sure that moving forward we're doing something that's going to be sustainable and that we can keep as a network. So from a lender's perspective, it's huge. Like Rachel mentioned, consumers are conscious where the money goes. But not only that, we're starting to see consumers that are reaching out and actually saying, I don't want to go, or I don't want a mortgage with this particular lender because of their ESG parts. I'm happy to call out some of the lenders that often get, people talk about HSBC, Barclays as an example, and would rather go to a Saffron, a Skipton, a platform as an example because they know of their green credentials. So lenders have to look at it not just from their own perspective, but also in terms of future business as well.
Okay, let's spin some positive now, shall we? So let's talk about innovation. Rachel, this is very much your area. This is where you sit. This is your business, I suppose, if you want to call it that. So let's talk about innovation. There is a worry that you get this initial surge. These new products have arrived. Everything sort of backs off and thinks, and consumer interest isn't there, so we'll back off. Or there's so many reasons we could. So innovation is key. What have you seen? There must be some exciting things out there.
There is so much innovation going on. It's a really, really exciting time. And I think you could be forgiven if you kind of regularly frequent the event circuit. You could be forgiven for thinking that all of a sudden this had stagnated. And actually what we see when there's a new idea to market or a new area of innovation, which is still relatively true for green finance, although we've been on the scene for 4 or 5 years plus in our industry, is there's lots and lots of noise in the beginning, and then people go behind closed doors and start to innovate, and all of a sudden everyone's under an NDA and it all gets very exciting. And you're seeing less and less from lenders because actually they're not far off of launching something really quite exciting. And I think it's fair to say we're in that phase now where people are being less forthcoming about what they're doing because everyone's trying to get the commercial edge, which is phenomenally exciting. Huge amount of work for brokers. There's lots more. Unfortunately, if you thought broking was about to become easier, it is not. It's a lot more detailed. But you know what? The great news is that safeguards the industry for many years to come. So it's a positive thing as far as I'm concerned. I have the absolute pleasure and joy, and I don't underestimate how much of a pleasure and joy this is, that I get to have lots of wonderful ideas and I don't have to think very much about how practically they're implemented. So I do have this kind of blue sky thinking where we do have this green mortgage market which is sustainable, which is scalable, which doesn't cost the consumer a lot of money, but also isn't costing lenders a lot of money, because we can't build a scalable market based on lenders lending at 0%, for example. Hugely commend what Nationwide have done. It's a fantastic initiative. But we can't ask all lenders to lend at 0%. It would be much more likely to happen in a building society environment than it is in a banking environment. We can't ask that to prop up the market. We do need additional support from external factors. We do need government legislation. We do need supportive frameworks that sit behind that to scale and move the market. So what I would like to see is products that incentivise and support customers through their retrofitting journey by a full end-to-end process. And Nick touched on a bit of that earlier. Something that you can look at raising additional finance for your home, buy-to-let, etc., your mortgaged property, But as part of that process, there's a survey done on the property to look at the energy performance, not in terms of purely EPC, but actually what are the carbon emissions of that property, and how can we improve that, and usage tips and all of the education that comes along with that. And you guess what customer at that point, he says, actually, I'd quite like to do 3 of these things on this menu of things I could do to make my home better. And at that point, there's a really clear handover to a retrofit company, hub, local supplier, network, etc., that then is able to complete that work, and it's verified. And within that scheme, this is probably a bit more technical than it needs to be, you need some sort of insurance mitigation product that protects the lender from the trade work not being done. That's a really important mechanism that sits in the middle of that. Then the work gets carried out, which is then verified, and the lender gets proof of that. And by lender getting proof of that, it has to be done through push data. That can't be done through customers sending in receipts, because it's just too much of an admin task, and that's not scalable either. Although in pilots, that's absolutely fine. And then at that point, your customer then drops onto a green mortgage. The mortgage doesn't become green until the verification that the work's been is done. So let's imagine, again, blue sky thinking, let's imagine you've got a 4% rate. That would be nice, but 4% rate that's loaded by 20 bips until that work is carried out. The customer then has every incentivization to do that work, because their mortgage then drops onto their rate. From a hedging perspective, this is well outside of my barn. You're just then taking off the loading element rather than having to completely change the rate. That is one of, I'm working on about 5 different blueprints for what green mortgages could be for the future, with a view of supporting lenders in innovating in that space. A product like that, incredibly difficult to design, incredibly difficult to element, especially if it's especially difficult element, especially if as a lender you've got legacy systems or you don't own your own tech, which is a lot of lenders. But in my bit of the world, I haven't got to worry about the practical element as much. I've got to worry about the design and how that works from a consumer journey point of view. And for me, the absolute euphoric moment for the green mortgage market will be a product that does make money for lenders, that does support customers, that does give brokers an opportunity to have really good conversations and do what they're really good at without having to get too lost in detail. That for me is the future of the green mortgage market, and it's coming, and it's incredibly exciting.
So Rachel, you mentioned in your introduction that the Green Finance Institute is government backed or supported, however you want to word that. Does that mean you can lobby? Does that mean you've got the ability to make change? Can you bring some of these issues to the government on our behalf as an industry to really drive support for green initiatives, and new initiatives to help people on the market? Is that what you're about?
Yeah, so we sit independent of public and private sector, kind of sitting in the middle, if you will, as a disc in between the two different markets. And while I won't personally pretend to have significant influence, because there's lots of other people in chain, and government is a very big moving part, one of the joys of my job is that I do get to feedback what barriers we're seeing. So I work really closely with a lot of lenders on how they're supporting and shaping their proposition. And all of the feedback that comes back from that, on all of the great ideas, I have the opportunity to then pass back to colleagues within GFI, and work quite closely with not BEIS anymore, DESNZ, Department for Energy Security and Net Zero. And do you know what? The comfort I can give is that those things are listened to, and that feedback is being heard, and that's reflected by the government's recently put together energy efficiency task force. This is a huge area where we're all scratching heads trying to make a sustainable, long-term scalable solution as opposed to a quick win. And that's why I think it can be quite easy to get quite frustrated on the outskirts and think, well, why hasn't this happened yesterday? This could have been done now. But actually, there's so many moving parts of the finance sector, and what we don't want to do is create something that has an unintended consequence further down the line. So yes, I do get the opportunity to feedback what blockers there are in the market, and we do use our influence to try and make good in the market. But I'm definitely not going to profess to have more personal influence than I do.
I have to say, let's just talk about the government for a second. We're a year away from an election. There doesn't seem to be a lot of legislation, a lot of things happening, a lot of things changing. There's lots of moving parts in government at the moment. So, the heat pump initiative, all these different installation initiatives and everything else, do you not think it's time the government stepped in a bit more, Nick? Do you not think that we could get a little bit more support to grow this green initiative across our industry and really drive change? Do we need that support? Is that necessary?
Yeah, definitely. I think when we talk about the government, it'd be great to see support in other areas as well. So, as we saw with the mortgage guarantee scheme, with the high LTVs on the backdrop of the pandemic, if we see things like the government backing for lenders on timber type properties, that's what we really see real innovation. Where it's, when it comes to modular homes, so the flat back homes, you know, backing the lenders to treat that, to use that as security. Um, and like, just on the back of that, it's a real shame to see the LNG halt the production on its modular housing factory. And it's just areas like that. If we're going to take the green element one step further, it's supporting those innovations and supporting the lenders to treat security in different ways rather than just bricks and mortar, but looking at different types of materials. That's going to make a huge shift towards, naturally, as a broker, because you have more pool of properties that you could lend on and things on those lines, but also more acceptable in terms of consumers and opportunities. So there's more that I would like to see the government do to support lenders and the intermediary market.
Rachel, I know that you don't want to. We won't talk too much in the way of politics with you because of your position. But do you have any ideas, any things that you think, these will really work, this will really push it, this will really drive it? We saw some innovations during the pandemic, with the stamp duty holiday, things to just reignite and re-engage the market. Surely the government should be on this green agenda and pushing this as well. So if you were to speak to the government, if you were to put your own two pence worth in, what are your thoughts? Or what have you seen? Is there something coming up that we should be a little bit excited about? Or, is there something we should be lobbying them with?
Do you know what? There's listening to this and thinking again, putting my broker hat back on. You think this feels quite distant, but there are, and I don't mind sharing. Because I think rather than keeping quite distant, there is so much that can be done. And the great thing with our housing market is because there are so many moving parts, it's quite easy to kind of tweak a small thing and it have a really large ripple effect. And I'm going to give a few examples, and I'm absolutely not citing that any of these are going to happen, but stamp duty would be a really good example of that. If there was stamp duty relief, if you do it, recommend or retrofit your home within a certain amount of time and support that. Council tax is another quite convoluted way of doing it, but you could. Tax relief for buy-to-let landlords who look at retrofitting their home to include some tax relief to support them. Then you've got things a regulator can do for lenders, so some things such as changing capital adequacy rules, where lenders don't have to hold as much capital if they're lending additional borrowing for green and sustainable reasons. And a reason I lift that up is actually if you look at your mortgage book and you think, let's say all of those loans grow by 10%, while broad brush approach, but grow by 10%, all of a sudden that becomes quite expensive for the lender to do, and that cost does get passed on. So there's things like that. There's things like looking at LTI caps, and could lenders go above that 4.5 times greater than I want to say 15%, but I've not worked for a lender for a while. Maybe it's 10%, somewhere between there. Could they look at changing their LTI caps, which just supports affordability if customers are looking at retrofitting homes? There's a lot of things that could be done that could really make, on their own, they don't make enough of a difference, but together they do. I just wanted to share a bit of a few of the things that are on the radar for that, but definitely not promising any of those to happen.
I love ending on a positive. Thank you, Rachel. So that's it. We've kind of run out of time. I think we kind of wanted to just talk and talk and talk. I think we probably could still talk and talk and talk for another few hours. It's a hot topic. It's something we will revisit. So a big thank you to Nick Mendez from John Charcoal. Thanks, Nick. And a massive thank you for our first time round with us. And I hope you'll come back, Rachel. Rachel Hunderset from the Green Finance Institute. To find out what Saffron are doing on green, have a look on the website, saffronforintermediaries.co.uk. And SFI Live is back again every month, but this time we're switching over to LinkedIn, where we'll be broadcasting live. So do join us for that. SFI Not So Live will be back in July. That's it from me, and a big goodbye from all of us. Bye.